I have the honor this evening of introducing our mediator sitting behind me. Sorry, I've got a broken ankle, so that's why I'm kind of a little casual tonight. But forget it. So I'm so excited to introduce Eleni Kounalakis tonight, our Lieutenant Governor. She's an amazing person. I've gotten to know her. I think I first met her when you were in high school. Yes, that's true. That was a very long time ago. So after high school, Eleni went to Dartmouth and graduated from Dartmouth and then moved back to the West Coast, went to Haas Business School at UC Berkeley. And graduated from Haas, and then she went to AKT Development, her family's development company, to undertake a really important endeavor, building housing in California. So we're very proud of her for that, and she did a great job at it. It was really terrific. When President Obama was elected, she was appointed to be the ambassador to Budapest, and she took her family to Hungary for a number of years. And when she returned to California, she wrote a book about her experiences. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it to you. It's a great book, so I'm plugging it for you, because it really is a terrific book about her experiences, because it's not what you think. It's not that she's just sitting in the residence in Budapest. She's doing a whole lot more. So I highly recommend it to you. Then in 2018, she became the first woman elected to the office of the Lieutenant Governor. And just a few months after taking that position, or being elected to that position, she was given the authority by the governor to take care of all things international. So she is sort of the international person in the for the governor and his designee on all things international, which apparently is quite unusual, but I think that speaks very highly to both her ambassadorial skills and to all of her diplomacy. So I think, it really is a pretty amazing thing to have that honor when you're the lieutenant governor. So that's really her, her professional resume in a very short order. So a couple of quick fun facts or off the professional resume. She loves the pizza in the basement at the Capitol.
How do you know? How do you know that? How do you find that out?
She loves Fanta.
I don't believe it. They're watching me.
She loves Starburst, but not strawberry. No strawberry. And she is a fan of the Deftones. So tonight, we have two Rubio sisters on stage, Assembly member and our senator. And there's a third in the audience. I think she needs to raise her hand and say it. This is Sylvia. Sylvia is also running for the Assembly. So, soon to be 3 Rubio sisters, which we'll just have to have you back. Okay? So with that, I would like to introduce the 4th Rubio sister, Eleni Kounalakis, our Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Tina. Thank you so much. You are intrepid. There is no question about it, coming out here with your poor broken ankle. And thank you for being such an incredible mentor to me and to so many other women in the Sacramento area, and really an example for so many in the industry that you engage in so well. It's wonderful to be back at She Shares. I was here right after I wrote my book, and I did a talk about what it was like, and then my sister, Athena, stood up and said, "Tell them about the boar hunt." A story for another time. But it's such a fabulous way to connect women who are interns and aspiring and looking forward to their career with others who've already made it several miles down the pathway in theirs, and to be able to tell stories that help particularly young women see what pathways look like, because you can have a vision, but then you also have to hear some stories and examples of how to get there. And I think tonight is a very, very special opportunity for people to hear from the fabulous Rubio sisters. I'm just thrilled. It is the very first time in the history of California that two sisters have served in the California legislature together.
At all.
Ever. Of course. And I had the opportunity to get to know them. First, I felt the impact of the Rubio sisters, and then I met them. And what I mean by that is that we got this sort of mysterious phone call that the Women's Democratic Legislative Caucus had endorsed my campaign. And we couldn't understand how that's possible because my opponent was in the legislature, he'd been running for years, and everybody had endorsed him already. So, including, most of the women, because again, they're colleagues, they worked here, they knew each other. So how does that math work? And then I met Blanca Rubio. So a story, again, I don't want to go too off track, but from the moment that I met Blanca and met Susan and got to know this incredible family, I was just so impressed and so taken with them. And then I heard the whole story, a story that starts really with their journey and their parents' journey coming from Mexico to the United States. And I'd really love to have the two of you maybe start with your childhood and your story and how you came to be Californians.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to also introduce another Rubio family member. I brought my daughter today, Nadia. If you can stand up, Nadia. And her two friends, Perry and Kelly. Where is she? Oh, there she is. And Kelly's over there. And I thought it was important to introduce Nadia Lopez, and she wants to change it to Nadia Lopez Rubio.
There we go.
The Mexican way, right? The Mexicans have the two last names, but I want to welcome them because I thought it was important that the little girls could hear the story. And of course, Nadia, my daughter, has heard this story, hundreds of times. Most of the time she's like, okay, Mom, I got it. But I thought it was important to bring her and her friends, and Robin Hines' daughter, Perry, have become really good friends with Nadia. And I heard Perry was going to be here, so welcome, Perry. And I wanted to make sure that I introduced them because our story is very different than their story, but I hope that their paths bring them to some kind of public service and hopefully some success, different than what we brought. And so I'll do a little bit, and I promise I'll pass it over to Susan. If you know me, I kind of take over the conversation, so I have to refrain sometimes from doing it, but since I am the oldest child, I get to start.
It's not obvious yet that she's older, so I'm really pleased you just said.
But I usually come back with I'm the prettier sister.
And so we've already settled that a long time ago, yes.
So, and I'll start mainly, I think, when I was running. We all know about the consultants. It's really important that you meet with the consultants. And the consultant says to me, so what's your story? And I was like, I don't know, what do you mean? I had been in local office, but never at this, the state level. And he said, what's your story? And I kept saying, I don't know, what do you mean? I've got no story. I'm a teacher, I can't, I'm a mom, just all of these, kind of facts. And he says, no, like, what's your story? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, okay, this is gonna be hard if we don't start from the beginning. Where were you born? And so we start with that story. I'm like, I was born in Mexico. And we continued the conversation, and I said, and my dad was a bracero during the bracero program, it's a work permit program. My dad's been in and out of the country since he was 19, and my dad just turned 79. And so I said, yeah, he was on the bracero program, and we went to a little town in Texas called Weenie, Texas. I had to Google it because I thought my parents were mispronouncing it, but there is a town called Weenie, Texas, very appropriate for Texas. And it's on the border of Louisiana and Texas in the Port Arthur area. And I said, yeah, and then my dad was working, and then we got deported, went back to Juarez, and he's like, wait, what do you mean you got deported? I was like, yeah, we got deported, and then we came to Los Angeles. You know, I'm continuing the story very matter of fact, and he's like, hold it right there. That is the story, and I'm like, that's a story? Because, and I'll explain, right? So we were deported when we were kids, and we came back to California. And in the neighborhood that we lived in, everybody's story was exactly the same. So in my mind, it was no different than my neighbors. You know, it was just kind of who we were, right? And so when he starts asking that, he's like, that's your story? I'm like, what do you mean? Which part? Mm-hmm. And I sounded naive, but again, in my head, I'm thinking, this is normal, this is what people do. And so we were deported. We came to California again, and we were undocumented. We came the day Elvis died, so I've been blamed for Elvis's death, on August 16th, 1977. Arrived at Union Station. There's a lot more to that story, but we arrived at Union Station, and we grew up in downtown LA. And so that's kind of the foundation of who we are, but we didn't know it yet, right? And so it comes to life later with all the battles that we have had, and the battles that were really up for the challenge most of the time, and people wonder, like, oh my God, why are you this way or that way? And then when we start talking about our story, they go, oh, resilience because of what we went through. You know, just a whole bunch of adjectives that we can put onto that because of the struggles that we have faced. But again, in my head, there weren't struggles. It was just part of life. So I will defer to the other Rubio sister because I'm going to help.
And I think it's worth noting as well at this point that you both became school teachers.
Yes.
Yes, we did.
So then I'll go back to that because, you know, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, I was an educator for 17 years. I taught 3rd grade, 4th grade, was vice principal for 3 years. Assemblymember Blanca E Rubios was a teacher for 16 years, same thing, 4th, kinder, different years. And it's a passion that we developed, and it took us a long time to understand as well that the passion for education really was shaped by our experience as children. When we lived in Winnie, Texas in the early 70s, it was really a town that was not very diverse. We were the only Latino family in that little town. And when we went to school, we were the only Spanish speakers in that school. And our memory of our elementary days there was the teachers putting us in a corner every single day and having us color because they didn't. I don't blame teachers. I know that we've come a long way in terms of recognizing the support system that second language learners need, but early 70s was a different time. It wasn't as diverse. And so they would corner us every single day, and that didn't...
Because we didn't speak the language.
Because we didn't speak the language. And again, it wasn't, I don't necessarily think it was intentional, but they didn't know what to do with us. In my head, they probably believed that because we spoke Spanish, we weren't intelligent enough to sit in the front with the rest of the other students. So when you think of us as educators, that really comes back to life later in our years because we realized that early in life we suffered a lot of discrimination. Even though, you know, we had beautiful parents who gave us such a lovely childhood, we didn't realize what was happening to us at the time. So we were deported. You know, we had just started school, and we went back to Juarez across the border from El Paso. We're able to go back to California, as already stated, and then we started school in California. We thought the discrimination was over. I am a twin. I have a twin brother, and also back in the 70s, to my twin's detriment, if you didn't speak the language, you weren't really assessed based on your language abilities. It was more, they would consider you, I'm sorry to say that at the time they told my parents, your child is mentally retarded, he will never learn, and he needs to go to special school. Also in the 70s, they wouldn't allow kids to participate in regular day classes. They would segregate you. And so my brother really had a language deficiency. It wasn't a learning disability. But nonetheless, they took him to a separate school with severely handicapped children. And he spent 2 years or so in that school. So he went from being a fluent Spanish speaker to not speaking at all. He would mumble and mimic all the behaviors that he saw. He was an intelligent child in a school where he was probably the most able child. And so the school district realized what they had done because, we now as teachers, we know our language comes from playing with kids and outdoor interactions. And so he was able to catch up. When they brought him back, it was a little too late. And what I mean by that is his self-esteem had taken a big hit. I was a twin, and I was 2 years ahead of him. Unfortunately, to his detriment, I was such a go-getter and A student. Overachiever, yeah. And I was always the one getting the awards, and so we didn't think about it back then, but it really was very devastating for him as a person. So as soon as he was able to be an adult and make his own decisions, he just decided to drop out of school and left the state, and he's been gone for about 30 years, right?
He lives in Kansas.
He lives in Kansas. So that story really shaped Blanca and I, because constantly we realized, again, as adults, not as children, that when we became teachers and we're constantly fighting for those children, it almost felt like we were still trying to save him. It was a constant.
Till this day.
Till this day, every child we touch, every parent we help, it's always that constant. I would say I do have a little bit of guilt that I was so successful, and by all accounts Blanca as well, and he just didn't have that opportunity. So that became our mission in life, to be educators and really make sure that we gave parents or second language learners the opportunities that my brother didn't have. And so I'll just turn it over to Eleni. Thank you for listening.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So here you are, you're school teachers, and suddenly you realize that there's more that you can do. What was the pathway like for election for you as you started to make your way into public office? And how was this sort of tag teaming between of you? How did it work out? Did you take turns running? Did you ever have a campaign at the same time? I do remember when I was down in the district that there were signs everywhere that just said Rubio
For California.
Rubio for California. And then you probably are recycling those for the assembly race. But tell us a little bit about what it was like to start running, at what level, how did you get there, and then how it is that you were able to achieve this where you're both in the state legislature at the same time.
So again, since I'm the oldest, I'll say it again.
I blame her.
So I was working for the city of Vernon. At the time I was in human resources. I wasn't a teacher yet. Didn't have basically any of my education yet, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And at the city of Vernon, I shared an office with a guy by the name of Albert Robles, who, there's two of them, little Albert, it's a whole another story. But Albert was on the water board, and he was the youngest water board member ever. He's like 6 or 8 months older than I am. And this was in 1996. And somehow Albert saw something in me. And, we would talk about, this and that and the other thing. Well, let me back up. So because of Susan, I became a citizen. We became citizens in 1994, mainly because of the Pete Wilson situation, but Susan was very adamant about we all have to do it, and I had applied, and she went and forced my parents to go stand in line for 8 hours so that they can get an application to become citizens. So I became a citizen, and then Susan and my parents became citizens in 1994. And this was in 1995. I had just become a citizen, so Albert was like, hey, are you interested? And I was like, no, but I would come to work every day and complain about the water. Oh my God, can you believe what they're doing? So the same thing that we all do, right? We complain about, the situation politically and what's going on. And so Albert was like, well, why are you complaining? Why don't you do it? And I was like, okay, Albert, let us get one thing straight. I like to complain. And that's all I want to do, right? And that's all I want to do. I'm really not interested. I've never, to be honest with you, I had never even worked on a campaign prior to him having this conversation with me. And he was like, you have to do it. I can see that you were interested in it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I believe in signs, and this is where Sister Sylvia comes in. I believe in signs. I believe in God, and I believe that God has a path for all of us, and that we have to be able to see. He opens doors. And you have to be able to see that door and really like take a chance and walk through that door. And we all see it, and sometimes we're too afraid to go that route, or we're too afraid to take that risk because of what may happen. Now, you may choose the wrong door once in a while, right? And so that's also a risk. But anyway, so I was like, God, what am I gonna do? Like, because, I was intrigued at this point. He kept talking to me every day, and I was like, fine. I'm like, God, please send me a sign, right? And then so my sister Sylvia had just had my nephew, who is 22 now, Austin, and I was going to go visit. Of course, I was going to go visit my sister and my new nephew. We had been there the night before when she was in labor, and then she kicked us out. And I went home. And the next day I was going to go visit my brother. So I'm going, okay, I'm visiting my brother. Well, she gave birth at Whittier Presbyterian, which is on the same street as the registrar's office. Wow. I was like, okay, God, I got the sign, I got it, right? Wow. So instead of visiting my nephew, I went straight to the registrar's office, pulled papers, and came back and visited my nephew. And I tell my nephew that story all the time, and he just loves that story, because it's the truth. And because I was like, what clearer sign, right, can I get? And so I went, pulled papers, and registered. But again, I had never, ever run for, not even, no campaigns, no anything. Most of you have at least phone banked or have seen a campaign. I had never even, I was like, what, campaigning what? So Albert says, don't worry, I'm gonna help you. And so he talked me into that he was gonna help me. Albert decides he wants to go to law school. He goes to Bolt. Back in 1997, when there was no cell phones, so if you actually wanted to communicate with somebody, you had to physically be at home, and they had to physically be at home. And he's a first-year law student, so I'm like, it wasn't, it was just like, Albert, I got red signs. He's like, oh, I was gonna tell you not red signs. I'm like, well, too late, because I already did. So that's how our communication happened. Everything was like, don't do this. I'm like, you should have called me yesterday, because we didn't have the communication. So lo and behold, he's like, look, I had, I think, $1,000. He hands me this list. We don't, the internet wasn't as sophisticated as today. Yeah. So he hands me a PDF list. He's like, just walk. I was like, what do you mean walk? He's like, here's some flyers with your $1,000. We're gonna do a card, you're gonna do one mailer, and here's some walking papers. So he helped me design this paper, and I have an actual scrapbook, not like the digital scrapbooks, with this picture. I was like, I remember it was a white wall and just me and with a picture, and I'm like, what was I thinking? But anyway, so I'm walking and knocking on doors, and I learned a really valuable lesson there, because I had no money, I had no political, aspirations at the time, and no real network, no real connection to any politician. So I'm knocking on doors, and he's like, and when you get tired, go knock on more doors. And I was like, well, I'm tired now. He goes, well, then go knock on more doors. And at the end, when the election night came up, I had honestly no idea that you can look up the voting online, and you can see it. I was like, okay, so today's election day, so what do you do? I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to sleep. So I went to sleep, and in the morning I'm waking up and I'm like, I wonder how you figure out how people won, right? So I call the county, I'm like, hey, can you tell me who won? He's like, yeah, it was like Contreras, Lake, and Rubio. I was like, what, Rubio? He's like, yeah, that Rubio's really lucky, she won by 18 votes. And I was just like, oh my God. And then, so of course, yes. So of course, I'm sitting there, I'm like, so now what? Like, what happens now? And then eventually somebody from the water district called, and they're like, hey, congratulations. We have a packet that we want to, give you so that you get to know the water district. I was like, okay, well, where is it? Right? And so it was so much like that. And at that time, I remember mentioning to the sisters, and they were like, okay, I think they walked with me, but we weren't really like involved in any of this. And so we learned a valuable lesson about canvassing and knocking on doors, and getting support. So that's the long story. Then I ran for re-election. The sisters were like amazing. They're like, okay, let's do this. And we divide should we tell the secret?
I'm not sure if you want to, but go ahead.
Okay, so we divide the city into threes, and there's always a Rubio in 1/3 of the city when we're canvassing. And so, hi, I'm Sylvia Rubio. At the end of the day, they remember Rubio. Hi, I'm Blanca Rubio, and hi, I'm Susan Rubio. And we speak so fast that people just remember, oh, Rubio. And so half of the time they thought, it was her, it was me, and it was like,
Oh my
that's a good mistake to make.
So if I may interject, I think the valuable lesson we learned in her first campaign is that when you don't have resources, you didn't have phone, you didn't have internet, the only thing we knew how to do is work hard.
Yes.
Work hard. We didn't take it for granted. And that was, we had to do the work ourselves. And so 22 years ago, we learned that the way you connect with people is by meeting them personally.
Face to face.
So we make sure that our Rubio knocked on every single door. And even her election as the assembly member, the election as the senator, we have so many more resources and volunteers, but that's stuck with us. We make sure as many resources as we have, we put them aside and we say, we're gonna win it. Us three are gonna win this. And so we make sure that we're constantly reaching out, being involved and going to communities. So that is, if anything you learn from that story is that we learned that you have to do the work yourself. I mean, that's how we've won, and we continue to do it, even though now we can literally let other people do the work for us. So we really know that that is our strength.
We still have to be involved.
That
in
is
that
our
campaign.
strength. We love people. We're people. We enjoy being around our constituents, and we thrive on that. And so we've never forgotten that. So we continue to do that.
So you take that kind of person-to-person engagement, where you see people in your community, you understand the impact that government has and that policy has on people who never have any idea where it comes from. And you find yourself as lawmakers in the state of California. How do you, going from where you started, sitting in your offices in the Assembly and the Senate, having each other to be able to work with, how do you see policy making through that prism? And what have been some of the key bills that you have championed? I know that quite a few of them have to do with education, so you may want to start with that.
So kind of to finish that story, I ran for re-election in 2001 for the water district. At that point, we knew what we were doing. And then I ran for the school board. I became a teacher in 2000, ran for the school board in 2003. Then Susan had moved into the city of Baldwin Park in 2004, and I'm like, hey, you should be city clerk. And she's like, okay, let's do this. And she won city clerk, and then I kept getting re-elected to the school board. So Susan then ran for city council. So to your earlier question, there was a Rubio on the ballot every 2 years. We were on off cycles, and so it was, I was on the school board, and then we walked, and then she was on the city council, and then she walked, and so the one I want to add to how I see the lawmaking. When I was on the water board, I was one of very few women. I mean, if you think there's really, really few women now in kind of any of the industry, in the water district, it was like old white men. And no disrespect to the old white men, but the diversity, especially in the water industry, is very, very, very small. And so I found myself in these big meeting rooms with all these people, and I'm like going, oh my God, what's going on? But I became president of the water board, and there is a substance called perchlorate that was seeping into our water systems. In Baldwin Park, where I live, is the Baldwin Park Operable Unit. It's a EPA Superfund where all the contamination from perchlorate is jet fuel that's seeping into the water. And so when I was president, we were talking about how we're going to fix it. It was back in 2001, where there was no real technology. The technology was just being invented. And so I said, well, why? In my naive state, I was 28, I think, or 29. And I was like, well, why don't we just sue them? And they're looking at me like, you don't understand. That's Aerojet. Aerojet is like this massive company. And I was like, I have no idea who they are, so why don't we just sue them? And the attorneys and everybody was like, you don't understand, this is this big old company and your water district is this little tiny water district. And I'm like, again, I don't care. Like, and now I'm like, wow, that was pretty forward, but because I didn't know any different, not because I was smart, I just didn't know the difference, right? And so we ended up suing Aerojet, and they settled with us for, I think at the time it was $30 million. And we, Valley County Water District, my water district was one of the first to build a perchlorate plant because of my naive, suggestion. So,
Amazing.
which is that lesson
Amazing.
about how we look at legislation now. I was told right away, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, but why not? And so we've taken a lot of that. I think personally, a lot of the, especially when they tell me no, like, don't tell me no, because that just only motivates me to do it more, And so for me, I take on a lot of the challenging bills. Some of them are easy, I'm not gonna lie, but a lot of them are education-based because it's so important for us, and I think we missed this part of the story. When we were in high school, I went and said that I wanted to go to college, and our counselor, and I graduated in 1987, which is not 1950, because of the statement I'm gonna tell you. So I went to the counselor, and I believe Susan went to the counselor and said, hey, we wanna go to college. And the counselor was like, honey, you're just gonna get pregnant and have children. Why don't you just go into home ec? And I was just like, oh, okay. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have, really a support system or somebody to say, hey, you should go. Now, my parents they're rock stars. They're, do this, do that. But in terms of how to get into college, how to navigate that system, they had no clue. My mom and my dad was working 2 jobs. My mom was working. I think my dad worked the graveyard shift. Just so that we didn't have to have babysitters, so he was at the house when we were, it was just this juggling act. And for somebody to decide, and for all the young ladies there, nobody decides who you're gonna become. And at the time, I was like, oh, okay, but I was lucky enough to meet my 2 very best friends now in the world, Ilana Bugoff and Elke Hirschman, were at USC, and they were like, you're too smart not to be in college. And they pushed and pushed I went to East Los Angeles College and then transferred to Azusa Pacific University. And when I do talks, especially for young women, for women in general, but for young women, somebody in 1987 decided that I wasn't good enough to be college or whatever it may be. And he had decided that I was not that person. And one of I call them my ego goals, my ego, is to do the commencement speech at Belmont High School. And to tell all of those bright minds that somebody for me decided that I wasn't good enough I was in college material, but I want to tell them that, thank you, but I have an office in that big white building in the middle of that park. And that, for me, is validation. And to the young ladies, I always tell them that is, it doesn't matter if you don't go straight after high school, because we all want that path for ourselves, but when somebody tells you that you are not good enough, don't believe them. You decide for yourself. And so a lot of my legislation has been on, education, early education, middle school and high school and beyond, because I think that it's really, really important for us to give opportunities. Now, I know the former superintendent of public instruction is here, thank you, Mr. Torlitzen, but not everybody's gonna go to college. So we have to have opportunities for those that want to go to college, and those that want higher education, but not necessarily a 4-year university as their path. And so that for me has been kind of my passion. One of the bills that I was really, really proud of, it died, but it was somehow weaved into the budget, those trailer bill magic that happens. So it was actually a workforce development opportunity for autistic kids. Because now, not only higher education for the rest of us, but our special or our differently abled community deserves the same opportunity. So that was a really good bill for me, because the autistic kids deserve, and all of them deserve, an opportunity to be successful. What happens in the K through 14 system is, we support those families that have different abled kids, but what happens after they turn 21? We all go, okay, we're done. They're not done, and the families are not done. They still have a life to live, and we somehow forget that there's life beyond that. And so those are the types of challenges that I take personally, because it's important to not only model, right, because of what I was told and what I went through, but also to help those communities that don't have the support that they deserve. So anyway, again, I tend to take over conversations. So, sister, your
Well,
turn.
Susan, a little bit on this, how you bring your life experience and how you think about legislation through that prism.
Well, for me, going back to education, when I decided to run for Senate, I always got that question, why did you decide to run? And the reality is, and if there's any teachers out here, I truly believe that we're at the forefront of every issue that we're currently facing, from hunger, homelessness. For years, I had been a teacher 17 years and a public servant. I was on the council 13 years simultaneously. So every time a parent needed resources, they always would come to me because they knew somehow I would connect them. And I did that for years, where I would find them housing and food and services. And so eventually when someone said, why did you decide to run? And really that was it, that I was facing, my families that would come, and I knew that they were living in cars. I knew that their clothing, was just not either clean or ironed. I always knew what kid came to my classroom hungry, so I always had a set of, snacks or food for them to eat. My students would come and cry about their daddy getting arrested for either beating up mom or dad. And so all these experiences really have shaped all the policies that I focus on. In particular, homelessness, which is an extremely, it's a big issue across California, but in my district, it's grown 28%. And so I was able to champion $5.6 million for homelessness and trying to ensure that our families are not on the street. At the same time, I passed a bill which created a regional housing trust so that we have all these cities collaborating and working together. What was happening or is happening in my community is that all the cities are trying to figure out things on their own. I was a council member, so I was there. I understood that a small city on our own, financially strapped for cash, you cannot do it alone. So this regional housing trust is going to help bring affordable housing, and the funding is going to help supplement that. So I'm very proud of that in particular. And another issue that many of you know me, I've been really loud about, and I really feel very passionately about. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and my story was well publicized, being that I was an elected official, and so was my ex-husband. And I have been working on domestic violence issues for a long time. And this year in particular, one of the bills that I took on was SB 273, which is the Phoenix Act. The statute of limitation hasn't been touched in California for many, many years. And what's been happening to women that are survivors, or victims rather, is they're given 3 years to figure out, first of all, that they're victims of domestic violence. And the reason I say that, because in my journey to pass this legislation, I interviewed so many women that have been in that situation. And we always think of victims of domestic violence as women. And I met someone who was 13 years old when she received her first punch, her first kick. And it took her 27 years to even realize what had happened to her all her life. It became a cycle of getting into bad relationships. And when she decided she wanted to speak up, and that's only because her abuser was in her neighborhood, time was up. Statute of limitation had lapsed. I interviewed 2 other women who were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. One of them in particular had been tied up by her abuser for a week or so, tortured, starved. She also told me that when she was falling asleep, he would shake her violently and didn't let her go to sleep for 4 days. And so the trauma that the victims experience, it's something that I think, unless you're in that situation, we could never understand. Even myself as a victim, every circumstance is different.
And so what is the statute now?
Well, I took it from 3 to 5 years, so I was able to extend it to more years.
And you better believe we're bringing it back for more.
So we had Susan, we 2 Rubio sisters had.
They left me behind. I'm still mad.
We had an incredible experience, and I feel so fortunate to have witnessed this. A few months ago, we were together, part of a delegation that went from California to Mexico City. And the purpose of the visit was to reaffirm the commitment of California to the relationship between Mexico and California. And especially during these challenging times with the federal relationship, we were met with open arms everywhere we went. The mayor of Mexico City, the chief of staff of the prime minister, who was in the countryside at the time, but everywhere we went, we had the opportunity to bring the friendship, the message of friendship of the state of California. And we brought a senator from our state who had been born in Mexico. And it was a pretty extraordinary coming home for you, or going back as a Mexican American. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you, and what that sort of in the trajectory of your story and your family story was like to be a senior representative of our state going back to Mexico in that capacity?
Well, I was, first of all, extremely honored that I was asked to participate in this delegation because, I don't visit Mexico often, not because I don't want to, but, our work schedules are so heavy. But when we arrived, just in general, they were very accepting and warm, but it was the pride that I think I personally witnessed. We met with the mayor, they call her the president of governors of Mexico City. And just they felt so prideful to be around me. And it is really rare, first of all, for me that probably the last time I went, that was the first time I had been to that side of Mexico. I literally was kicked out of the country, right? And to be there just representing California was extraordinary. And the reality is that most of the time I'm very connected with my culture. I speak Spanish 90% of the time when I don't have to be in public, and just to be able to have conversation. Of course, I would always ask, is it okay if I speak Spanish? And they would engage me, and it was such an amazing trip because I even learned a lot about myself as a Mexican, citizen as well, that we have so much to offer. And I went back in my head to that little girl that was told, number one, you need to leave the country. Number two, coming back to the States and also having that experience where both of us were told that we were in college material, that we just needed to really just go to home ec classes because that's all we were going to be. And so in that moment, it almost felt like my whole life flashed before me and all the successes I've had. And just to be home, it was really extraordinary. And for them as well, because they had someone from their own country here in the state of California. So I was very honored. Thank you for inviting me.
Pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Sylvia, because we were at your birthday dinner and she told me, nope, not going to do it. They're trying to convince me. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And then suddenly a seat opened up. Tell me about, since I wasn't at the kitchen table that night, how did the conversation go?
Well, first of all, what a lot of people don't know is that Blanca and I have always been the face of the organization, so to speak, and the person always getting us elected is Sylvia Rubio. She's always doing the hard work. Yeah, let's give her a big round of applause. Well, Blanca and I are having meetings and trying to get elected. There was our little worker bee just, making sure that everything was done, walking, phone banking, or, our phone banking system. So she has always been the one leading the charge. We just take off and do our thing, and she handles everything. And so for a long time, let's just start there. Blanca and I always knew Sylvia is way more capable than we could ever be when it comes to campaigning, but her passion for public service, she's also a field rep for the city of Carson. Prior to that, she was a field rep for Assemblymember Mike Gifts, and so public service
and a businesswoman.
Yeah, and a business, and then she had owned a restaurant for 12 years, her own restaurant. So we always knew her passion for public service, passion for her community, her children. We always knew eventually she would get there, but of course her goal was always to raise her children. She just saw her last child go off to college. She turned 18 in June, and she just went off to college. And so that is where she said, my children are grown. And we weren't thinking that the seat was going to be open, but the conversations were already happening. And lo and behold, as he did become available.
To the Lieutenant Governor's point, I don't know if you read some of the articles on the Rubio sisters, and on one of the last sentences, they said, you have a third sister. I'm like, oh, we have plans for her. She just doesn't know it yet, right? And just a funny story. So right now, so we come in and I'm working the room because that's my favorite thing to do. And I see her and she's like, hey, you need to put the microphone on. And she's like, and I said, sister, stop. I said, you're not organizing this. This is about you today. You need to be working the room now. Like, I need to transition you from always taking care of us and what we need and my purse and, my microphone and all of that. And I'm like, no. We literally had this conversation and she's like, okay. Because she's so used to being our organizer, our, champion that now we have to remind her that this is about her too. And the kitchen table, it was literally Thanksgiving. And my mom knows something's up when the three of us are like, and we're not fighting, by the way. We're like, and so, we're talking and, the position's open. She's like, yeah, I think. And, we're going back and forth. And my mom's like, in Spanish, she's like, ¿Qué se traen? Like, what are you guys up to? And I was like, oh, shoot. Well, we have this idea, Mom. Like, this happened. And she's like, she rolls her eyes. She's like, oh, my God. And I said, well, what do you think? She goes, I don't think it matters. I think you already decided, right? And my daughter, Nadia, who's 11, by the way, and this is her life. She's been in some of us have been in office longer than she's been alive, so this is her life. So Nadia goes up, she's all, Auntie Sylvia, don't you worry. I'm ready to walk, knock on doors, and phone bank.
Yeah.
So we just knew.
So, and I said to Sylvia, what else do you need, sister? And so my mom was rolling her eyes, and my dad just kind of sits in the back. He's like, okay, we're going to do this again.
We're ready.
We're ready.
More Rubios in the legislature. That's all I have to say. Okay, let's open this up for questions.
Hi, I'm Belen Flores with the California Center for Civic Participation, and we support high school students in the political process to get them excited about government, governmental systems, and to learn how they can make their voice heard. We have a program called Women in Politics, and we have several of our young women here today with us. So I wanted to know from each of you if you could give them a little advice when they're on their career path or pursuing their passion, and they get overwhelmed by the things they see in the media, all of the challenges that we face as Latinas and as women and as just, residents of the state. What kind of advice can you give them to kind of push through and to just get that grit to really follow their dreams?
So I'll start on this one because I think I already gave you one without calling it advice. Don't let anybody decide what you're going to become. You decide for yourself. It's going to be hard. I'm not saying that it's easy. It's going to be difficult, but once you make that decision of what you want to become, then the outside voices, you just need to shut them off, because it's really easy to fall into the whole, oh my God, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, based on the social media. And, look, I'm not a fan of any of the social media outlets. I have to participate because my staff would kill me if I don't. But people post about how amazing their life is, how wonderful they are, and you're like, come on. Every single day your life is amazing. Some days you have bad days. And you post on, and so we get sucked into this life of everything has to be perfect because so-and-so's life is perfect on Twitter every day or on Facebook every day. And that right there, to me, feels like we get sucked into this. So don't get sucked into any of that facade, because that really is a facade. We are human beings and we fall a lot. The problem is getting up. And if you get up, who cares? You're gonna fall again. And I think that grit that you're talking about has to be within you. Don't let anybody tell you what you're gonna become. You decide for yourself, number one, and number two, you're gonna fall. That's expected, because let me tell you, the best decisions that I've made now is because of the experiences of when I fell, a long time ago, or whatever experience that I had, and those experiences that you're going to right now are going to serve you for what you're going to become when you decide what you're going to become. So for me, those are the kind of the grit part of it. It sounds easy and it's not. I'm telling you it's not easy, and my children, Nadia knows how difficult it was for me, how difficult it was for my sister, and just things that we go through. It's a personal journey and a personal struggle, but I think at the end of the day, if you can decide that every time you fall, you're gonna get up, that's half the battle. What you do afterwards is based on, then you get the support system, then you have some mentors, then you have folks that you can talk to that can help you through whatever it is. And that's another thing that women don't do. We think we have to do this all on our own. We don't. I'm blessed, lucky enough to have 2 amazing sisters, my brother, my children, my parents, and the 4th sister to support us in all of this. Find those sisters, even if they're not your blood. Find those sisters that are going to support you and be positive, because we all have some of those sisters that are not too nice to us, and you still maintain those relationships because you think that you owe somebody something. If those people are not adding to your life, cut them out of your life. I know it's easier said than done, but if that person, when they see you, doesn't have something good or positive to say, then they shouldn't be part of your life, because you need somebody that's going to lift you up, but also be that somebody. Be that sister that lifts somebody up when you see that they're having a bad day, because at the end, it's a community that lifts us up. Like I said, I'm blessed to have my 2 amazing sisters and my daughter and my kids to do that. And by all accounts, I have so many of you here that I've developed relationship with that I can go to. I'm looking at some of you right now that I know that I can go to. And when I'm having a bad day, I'm like, And we have a cocktail or a coffee, and we decide that, that was silly anyway. But have those relationships, build that network of friends that are going to lift you up, cut those people out of your lives that are going to be negative, and don't pay attention to the social media. Susan.
All right. Sorry. We have another question in the front.
Samantha Tran with Children Now. Our organization is on a mission to build power for kids and making sure they're the top priority in budget and policy decisions. But I actually wanted to ask a question that builds on the point that you were raising earlier, Assemblymember Rubio, when you used the example of walking into the water board and having everyone tell you, no, we can't do that. And I'm curious from both of your perspectives that challenge of finding voice and finding voice in a context where there's power and complexity. Like, what are some of the pieces of advice you'd give to young people or those like myself who are much further along in their career around, how to really find voice and stay true to that?
Well, to find a voice, you have to have a voice. And I think there's a difference, and I say that intentionally because we talk about finding a voice. But if you don't speak, you can't even find the voice, right? So sometimes finding the voice starts with actually saying something, whether you get shot down or not. And then once you speak, then you can find that voice that you're looking for, because a lot of us tend to just retreat when things go wrong, right? And it's very easy in this context. There's 120 legislators, right? And we have to build those relationships with those folks that are going to support us. The beauty, and I say this with all like the intensity that I can, the beauty of this place is that my vote is one, her vote is one. And guess what? I need everybody, and at some point they're gonna need me. So you have to be able to negotiate.
You know what's really interesting about the story of the counselor who said college is not for you, and the parallel with that of you can't sue Aerojet, is that in both of those cases, it seems to me that you felt a truth. You felt the truth that, wait a minute, I live in a place where I've heard that if you work hard and you strive, you can go to college. So you're telling me something that doesn't feel true to me, so I'm gonna push back. And then with the Aerojet case, you'd been around, you know that in this system of laws, if a large corporation contaminates the water of a community, the water agency can sue them for justice. You knew that in your experience. And so when you mentioned it, even though people said, no, 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 and the reason wasn't we don't have a case. The reason was we're not powerful enough. We're not important enough. And so if someone uses an excuse to you that you can't do something, not because it isn't right, but because of who you are, seems to me a good opportunity where you're going to stand up and say, well, I'll just show you.
Right. And to your question, that's what it is. People are telling you that you can't. And you may not be able to do it the first time or the second time or the third time, but the point is that if you don't try, then you're already lost. My mom says, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Right? And so if you don't speak, then you're never going to find that voice. And it's difficult. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how amazing this is, but you need that support system. And luckily now I have a built-in support system. You know, there's a couple times I'm like, Eleni, you know. And I have amazing staff. My chief of staff is here, and we need to support, you know, depend on each other. But you're right, it is that truth. I came to the United States. My parents came to the United States to find a better life for us. So if I sit back and not do what I think is right, or what I think is just for my community, then I'm just like everybody else. And I love everybody else, but I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to be me, and I want to make sure that the fight that I take on, I can look at my daughter and say, Mama's doing this. And she always says this to me, and she makes me cry. She's like, Mommy, I'm so proud of you. And she said at Thanksgiving, she says, I'm so proud of Nani. Auntie Sylvia's doing it. She goes, my family's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Your
so if
family
I
is
can,
amazing.
yes, thank you. And if I can speak those truths, and because we lecture these kids all the time about how you can do whatever you want, and you can be whatever you are, and if I'm not doing whatever, you know, be whoever I want and do whatever I need to do, then what am I telling my daughter? I'm full of it, right? And so that's the conversation I think that has to happen. But this is a different context because we have 120 other, or 119 other people that I have to convince to pass my policies, and that's where that voice and that negotiation and the, you know, look, I'm not beyond, you know, bringing crack bread is what I call it. She's had some. So there's this bread called señorita bread, and I call it crack bread because you better believe that you cannot have just one. And I buy it at Bad Bakers in the Thomas. I'm giving them a plug. But I sent a box to every single office, and I always include staff because guess who makes the decisions? I love me. And I think I'm fabulous and amazing, but I depend on my staff to give me advice on what's going to happen. And I also know, because my parents come, my dad was a bracero, my mom's a housekeeper to this day. I know that if you don't treat staff well, that they are going to not stand up for you. And when you treat staff well, they're going to stand up for you. So some Republican, and I'm not kidding you, a couple Republican offices, I've sent, you know, my crack bread, and I make killer mole too. That's a whole other story. And I've sent mole to them too. But some of the staff members will come and say, thank you, Assemblymember Rubio. I saved you this piece of pie from Frank Fats because you've been so good to me. When there's an office that the member is kind of on the fence of something, I can guarantee you that staff member is going to say, oh, it's Assemblymember Rubio. She brought me, you know, she was kind to me. Vote yes for her bill, right? And so those are little tricks.
The real way that things work. It's all about Frank Fats pie.
Pie, right, and crack bread, but
Well, and I'm just going to share very briefly that, I mean, you're always going to have people telling you no. I mean, I think that's just the nature of the game. And real briefly, I'm going to share how I became a council member because I have been the elected city clerk for 4 years in my city. And there was a gentleman on the dais that constantly would say that I wasn't allowed to speak, even though I wasn't elected, and my right as a city clerk was to speak at events or on the dais. And he just kept saying, she's not allowed to speak. I mean, as rude as he can be. And I think it's a scary place to be. But I think we do have that power within us. And I remember the day he embarrassed me in front of everyone. Some kids came and they were getting awards, and being an educator, I wanted to commend them, and he just shut me up in front of everyone. And I remember thinking like, okay, I have to figure out how to get my own courage. And so guess what I did? I ran against him that year. I took him out, and I became the council member. All right, yeah, she's not kidding. Every time they say no, that's how we get here.
I think that we are at time.
Yes.
I just want to thank everyone for coming down here. I hope that in these, you know, just under an hour, you were able to see a little bit of what I have had the privilege of seeing up close. It is a remarkable thing that two sisters are serving in the legislature And the story behind it is even more remarkable. Thank you both very much.
And hopefully 3 sisters.
And hopefully, you see, they're campaigning right now.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Aw, thank you.
Yes.